Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the Peace Prize Award Ceremony 2021 of Finnish Christian Peace Association, and also then the panel discussion that we're going to have towards the end. I just introduced very quickly from the board of Finnish Christian Peace Association, Mr. Risto Pontela, also with us, responsible for the technical side, but so much more in the association. So my name is Jussi Ojala and I'm the chair of the board of the association, and I will be moderating this event. So the agenda in this concise 1-hour session is the following. First, we do the presenting of the Peace Prize and the possible response by the recipient, Ambassador Whyte. And secondly, I will provide a short introduction to the panelists, followed by the panel discussion. And then we are welcoming the questions in the chat from all of you to the panelists. And kindly indicate to whom you are directing the question. And if possible, keep the questions quite short. I know that State Secretary Sumuvuori needs to leave before the 7 o'clock finish time when we are closing this. So we would take first questions actually to her. Yes.
Please, I would say that you can use answers and questions button on this screen for the panelist.
Yes, questions and answers from below. Thank you, Risto. So the Finnish Christian Peace Association was born in 1976, which is coincidentally the same year as I was, and if I understand correctly, State Secretary Sumuvuori, whom we have the honor of joining us today as a panelist. So we are all in our 20s currently, right? Good. So we are an ecumenical organization and we promote the dialogue among religions. Since 1982, we've been awarding the Peace Prize to highlight the acts of peace by individuals and societies. It's a yearly race where the whole world is competing. While there surely could be silver and bronze medalists in this race, we only award gold. The paramount merit in the domain of supporting and promoting peace in the world for this year. And in 2021, the Peace Association is delighted to award its Peace Prize to Ambassador Elayne. Let me still read the short justification as it's written in the award itself, and I think you can see it in your screen. So the Finnish Christian Peace Association has awarded its Peace Prize 2021 to Ambassador Elayne Whyte for her leadership and instrumental role in the process that led to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The Finnish Christian Peace Association wishes to acknowledge the constructive and impactful role that Costa Rica has played in promoting global peace and the exemplary way in which Ambassador Whyte continues this tradition. It's truly an honor to present the prize to you, Ambassador. I have been myself convinced for years that there are two long-term and unfortunately sustained mega threats to the mankind: the climate change and nuclear weapons. While the former has been receiving attention, although not enough, by the international community, there still has been far too little happening in addressing the nuclear threat. It's remarkable how the process and entering into force of the TPNW has changed this. We at the association, of course, acknowledge that the process is a result of a broad set of stakeholders from various governments and civil society, some of whom we are privileged to have with us today. Yet today we celebrate you and your leadership, Mrs. Ambassador. And few anecdotes maybe still to close the official part of the event is that in our past couple of examples who has received the award before you. So in 1991, the future president and future Nobel Peace Laureate, Martti Ahtisaari, got the Peace Prize. So far before he became the president or Nobel Peace Laureate, 1991. And in 2015, so 6 years ago, the current Foreign Minister of Finland, Mr. Pekka Haavisto, got the award. So I think everybody can now count from these years now about your possible future direction. Ambassador, there might be other routes, but this is also a possibility. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jussi Ohala, and members of the Finnish Christian Peace Association, distinguished guests, Ms. Juhana Sumuvuori, State Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Dr. Taha Kronberg, distinguished fellow at SIPRI and chair of the Peace Union of Finland, and all the colleagues and friends who are joining us through this platform. I would like to express how honored and delighted I am by this award that I received from the Finnish Christian Peace Association. I feel honored as a person, as a diplomat, and as a Costa Rican citizen. My country, Costa Rica, as you have mentioned, is a land of peace. Very early on in our Republican life, our founding fathers and mothers understood that the survival of the state does not rest on the cold promise of force and military strength, but on development, justice, and democracy. It is these principles that permeate Costa Rican diplomacy and those that guide us in our action, seeking that international peace and security be built on equitable and sustainable development, respect for human rights, the respect for our natural environment, and on a global order based on rules, institutions, and international cooperation. For that reason, I received this award not only in my capacity as a Costa Rican diplomat, but also on behalf of my fellow Costa Ricans, on behalf of our diplomacy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and of the extraordinary team that accompanied me in the execution of the duties of the presidency of the United Nations Conference that negotiated and adopted the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, without whose work it would have been impossible for me to complete this mandate. I also wish to highlight that this award, in my view, brings together, closer together, both the Costa Rican and the Finnish societies. We are separated by a geographical distance of 10,000 kilometers, but we are united in the values and aspirations that we share, especially those of the solidarity that drives state policies, a development model based on the well-being of people and the care of our nature. We have the same population, 5 million people. We are among the 12 countries with the highest political representation of women and rank as high human development societies as well. We rely on innovation and human talent, international neutrality, and strive for a world of peace, progress, and freedom for all peoples. Allow me then to propose that this award be considered also as an expression of the synergies between two peoples that are geographically distant, but very close in their yearnings and aspirations of development and peace. I thank you very much, and I thank all the members of the associations and all of you who are joining us today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for these words, and I can only concur of the message that you said, and I feel the closeness actually, despite the distance. And in my other capacities, I have the honor of working with, for example, Mr. Christian Guillermet of the your foreign ministry, and we had an excellent cooperation on working for the human right to peace process, which he was leading successfully. So we move forward towards the panel discussion. The title of the panel is The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and Vision of a World Without Nuclear Weapons. And very short introductions to you panelists, which will not do justice to neither of you, but or none of you, but please bear with me. So Ambassador Whyte, so you have an extraordinary long career in international affairs with many posts at the Costa Rican foreign ministry, including being an ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva. I also understand that you have been the first woman and the youngest person to serve as the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs for your country. And last but not least, a great gender champion, which I think is something really to celebrate. Next up, I would like to present the State Secretary Johanna Sumuvuori. We are very pleased to have you with us today in the panel. And Ms. Sumuvuori has a long career in politics in Finland, both in the national and municipal level. She's the former member of the Parliament of Finland, and also she has a long history as a member and a leader of different civil society movements in Finland. So as a civil society representative, we feel you are really one of us, like you all definitely. So welcome. And Dr. Tarja Kruunberg, who is currently the Distinguished Associate Fellow at SIPRI and the Chair of the Peace Union of Finland. She's the former Minister of Labour of Finland, a former member of the Parliament, and also a former member of the European Parliament. Among other duties, she has been leading the Copenhagen Peace Research Institute, a long career in the field. I would like to invite our new Peace Award laureate, Ambassador Whyte, to take the first round of addressing the panel. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Oala. Thank you very much. I would like to take this special occasion to highlight some points regarding, first of all, what I see the relevance, what the relevance is of this treaty and of the adoption of this treaty and its entry into force, and also share some thoughts about the current juncture that we find ourselves in some reflections on the way forward. In terms of the significance, the adoption of an entry into force of this treaty, we all understand that it is a historic, it is a legal and also an institutional and human milestone that both reflects the current nature of international relations and at the same time creates an impact in the international nuclear order. It pays justice to the victims of nuclear weapons use and testings, and in that respect, I believe it has a very profound humane relevance as well. From the historical point of view, it is of relevance that after 75 years, the international community was able to achieve this goal of an international prohibition treaty that closes the cycle in the sense that with this adoption, all weapons of mass destruction have a specific legal prohibition in international law. In this case, it also builds on regional treaties that have already established 5 nuclear weapon-free zones. My second point is that the treaty was a pending task for the international community from the point of view of ethics and justice, as it provides a historical historical justice for the victims of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and all kinds and generations of nuclear testings throughout the world. It is usually perceived that international relations is a field driven only by state interests that do not have the same attributes as people's behavior. This is false. Today's international relations constitute a space where states coexist with transnational networks of citizens, scientists, international organizations, companies, and many other players. But above all, it is a space where the aspiration for justice, equity, legitimacy remains a fundamental parameter of international relations, especially in the 21st century. So the fact that survivors that strove for decades for this legal prohibition were able to see with their own eyes, present there at room 1 of the United Nations building, the voting screen in which an important majority, the majority of the international community adopted a very comprehensive prohibition towards nuclear weapons, I think was one of the most exciting moments, definitely in their lives, but in our lives as well. Their presence in the room was a guarantee, was an assurance that we could not fail in that endeavor. Another point that I want to highlight is that in this process, all scientific and historic evidence of the horrendous consequences of nuclear weapons, the treaty does not treat them as a necessity. It strongly delegitimizes them and gives them an inhumane and illegal character. When it acknowledges in the text of the treaty that any use of nuclear weapons would have catastrophic, devastating consequences that cannot be adequately addressed by any institution. They transcend national borders. They pose grave implications for human survival, for the environment, for socioeconomic development, for the global economy, for food security, and for the health of current and future generations, and that they have a disproportionate impact on women and girls, including as a result of ionizing radiation, but also on indigenous peoples. The treaty therefore states that any use of nuclear weapons would be abhorrent to the principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience, and that it contradicts all the bodies of law that have been created for many other aspects of society, such as international humanitarian law, human rights, environmental law, among others. The adoption of the treaty is also relevant from an institutional point of view because it was the General Assembly, the universal and democratic body par excellence, that issued the negotiation mandate. After decades of paralysis of other specialized forums, that are subjected to the rule of consensus to make decisions where the veto power of one state paralyzes collective action. But it is also historic because the negotiating mandate was issued at a time of heightened tensions and inflammatory rhetoric between two nuclear states. I mentioned that the treaty, I believe, closes a historic cycle and opens a new stage. First of all, because it emphatically delegitimizes nuclear weapons as security instruments. And this definitely has an impact on the way international security is discussed in the 21st century, especially in multilateral spheres. The debate changes, and it's going to change deeply. The first message is that we cannot rest on a security scheme that implies insecurity and existential risk for all humanity. It strengthens the debate for the very conceptualization of security. Today, we understand the interconnected nature of all human activities. We understand that security cannot be built at the expense of development, at the expense of the environment, at the expense of health, as precisely as Pope Francis himself also conveyed to the negotiating conference. In other words, the concept of state security cannot continue to be extracted from the comprehensive concept of human security, the security of the economic system, food security, and the security of humanity overall. Another point is that the treaty has helped to bring the problem of nuclear weapons to the forefront, both internationally, but also at the domestic level in various countries where nuclear weapons are either stationed, or countries where nuclear deterrence is the basis of their security, be they under NATO or other extended nuclear security schemes. And at the domestic level, whereas polls in many countries show that people want nuclear abolition, public policies of the countries of the nuclear status quo maintain their attachment to nuclear deterrence. And of course, the legitimation and the restrengthening of the abolition movement generates some internal tension in some countries that possess nuclear weapons, but also in the dialogue between non-nuclear and nuclear states. Non-nuclear weapon states are increasingly concerned with the current situation of tension among nuclear powers and with the trend towards the modernization and increase of arsenals. And with the explanation that the nuclear states give that the current international environment of great power competition is not conducive towards reducing the role of nuclear weapons. We believe that quite the contrary, in times of great power competition, military buildup is a kind of equation that led to conflagrations in the past. And in this very strategic juncture is where humanity needs complex and systemic thinking to respond with more comprehensive options to very complex problems, including that of restraint. Here I say the treaty is, of course, a milestone, but it is a milestone in a long road because nuclear weapons right now are tied to the world power structure. It is clear to everyone that there is nothing perennial in the history of humankind. We are on a constant path of evolution, and the nuclear order is also in a constant path of evolution, and we hope towards abolition and towards the construction of a world free of nuclear weapons. Social change is generated by the permanent interaction of ideas, norms, structures, and the way in which events are shaping reality. If we go back in history, other problems such as slavery or colonialism, expressions of power structure that we now see as distant stories, were delegitimized by collective agency, by the structural changes that occurred at some point, and by many milestones, including many norms of this sort that were adopted throughout decades or even centuries. So this means that the existence of norms is a fundamental part of the response to those problems, but of course it is not the only way forward. The existence of the treaty of the prohibition of nuclear weapons is a fundamental component in this process of change, to which we all aspire, and it will be an important element in global nuclear diplomacy. It has come to strengthen the global architecture of non-proliferation, along with the other treaties regimes, especially that of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Regional Prohibition Treaty, and the treaty that prohibits nuclear testing. But of course, there are no easy solutions and not one single road. Climate change and nuclear weapons, as you rightly mentioned, are problems created by human beings, and humanity is now confronted with great challenges to address both. In the case of nuclear weapons, bilateral and multilateral efforts will be needed, but great power cooperation is a phrase that we also expect to hear, not only that of great power competition. Great power cooperation is also music that we want to hear. Those who possess such destructive power with nuclear arsenals, with such influence on human survival, do have a responsibility to the rest of humanity to cooperate, to reduce risk, to generate transparency among them, and to engage in good faith discussions of as I say, arms control, N, as in non-proliferation, and D, as in disarmament, that requires substantive agreements, regimes, fora, and all kinds of dialogue. But we need all those capital letters, A, N, and D at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, back in 1945, there were many voices against the start of the nuclear era. 70 scientists that participated in the Manhattan Project that developed the atomic bomb wrote a letter to President Truman asking him not to use the bomb. Several influential US military leaders at the time also opposed ushering an era of nuclear nightmare. As General William Leahy put it, the use of nuclear weapons created an ethical standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Ages. Similarly, the International Red Cross team that arrived to both cities in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and witnessed the devastation requested that whatever the weapon was used there, it should be prohibited under international law and abolished. Today, we are 75 years after those events, and 25 years separate us from 2045, when we would have met the century of the nuclear nightmare. Today, the voices of nuclear abolition are growing louder and stronger, and states that have promoted the TPNW express permanently our unwavering commitment to dialogue and, of course, to the renunciation of nuclear weapons, but also our commitment to constructive dialogue in all fora and at all times. When it deals with nuclear weapons and all existential threats, the inaction of today might be the annihilation of the future, and we cannot afford that inaction. And this is why I express and reiterate my personal commitment and that of Costa Rica to continue on the process of building a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you very much. And I very much welcome and look forward to the opportunity of listening to the other panelists.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And that was a powerful and very comprehensive address to the panel. I picked many issues, strong words, and with lots of meaning. Especially, I thought that somehow how you were able to describe the whole international context, that the treaty also then has all the aspects of it. So it's really groundbreaking. I cannot agree with you more. Next up, please, State Secretary Johanna Sumuvuori. I also encourage now still our participants to post the questions, because we know that Ms. Sumuvuori needs to leave a bit early. To be frank, I don't understand how the question and answer works, but if you know, please do, or then you can use the chat to all, so that the questions are heard. But please, State Secretary, the floor is yours.
Dear Ambassador, dear guests, I'm very honored to be here. So first I would like to thank the Finnish Christian Peace Association for inviting me to address this event. And of course, I'd also like to express the government and my personal congratulations to Ambassador Whyte on the Finnish Christian Peace Association's Peace Prize 2021. I think your dedication to advance peace, disarmament, and sustainable development is something that deserves great respect and admiration throughout the whole world. So I really want to congratulate on this great achievement and a very well-deserved prize as well. So we celebrate you today, especially for your leadership in accomplishing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and your dedication to nuclear disarmament and global peace. So thank you very much for your work on that. I'd also like to say a few words about Finland's foreign and security policy and disarmament policy at the start. So maybe I could start by saying that we have a very strong focus on peace building in our government program. There is the complete paragraph on how Finland will build peace and advance peace building in multiple ways, be it crisis management or humanitarian work or mediation and disarmament included, of course, as well. And we have stated in our government program that we will work to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and will use extensive expertise in arms and control matters also internationally. And we will, of course, support the status of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in nuclear disarmament, where we've been active in many, many years. And we will continue to analyze also the content of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and compare it with other key initiatives in the sector and actively follow the progress made in bringing the treaty into force. And I think one of the most important sentences in the program is the government program is that the government will assess how the process moves forward, and we will study the possibility of joining to the TPNW. And Finland seeks the prohibition and disposal of all weapons of mass destruction. Those are the sentences that I have considered as very important in the program. So we will follow how it pans out now in the future, and that's something I will be very interested to hear as the panel fellows also on Ambassador Whyte's views as to what kind of relation the treaty will have in the future with the NPT process and so forth. So we will continue on following that. Maybe to say a few words about the current state of the world. Ambassador Whyte was also referring to the wider context, which is very important here. And yeah, we are living in the period of great power competition, and it's a competition particularly about international influence and technological advancement and economic success, and also about military might with special emphasis on nuclear and other strategic weapon systems. And of course, we all know that nuclear weapons, they are the paradox of international security and international relations. So nuclear powers regard nuclear weapons as the basis for security and stability, and at the same time, nuclear weapons pose an existential threat to all countries and to the whole humankind. And the international community has tried to overcome this paradox for more than 75 years. And the very first resolution of the UN General Assembly in January 1946 addressed the threat posed by nuclear weapons. There has been numerous other efforts after that resolution, and the entry into force of the TPNW in January is the latest step in this respect. Arms control can advance nuclear disarmament and reduce risks associated with nuclear weapons, and arms control is based on the idea that the country also has common interests with its potential enemy, such as the interest in avoiding a war that neither wants, minimizing the costs and risks of an arms race, and limiting the devastating effects of a possible war. Finland is committed to not to acquire nuclear weapons as a party to the NPT and through our national legislation. And as reflecting the earlier statements I said, our goal is a nuclear-free world. So that is very much something we all share here tonight. And Finland welcomes also the extension of the New START Treaty by 5 years. And at the same time, we have to admit that the state of nuclear arms control is deplorable and needs serious improvements. And there are a few reasons for this. And there is a great lack of political will, unfortunately. So it's very unfortunate that arms control is not seen as a preferred way to improve national and international security, and existing commitments are not honored as they should be. And qualitative improvements of nuclear weapons and their integration with other weapon systems make it more difficult sometimes to identify and agree on restrictions on international fora. And the world has become more multipolar with multiple centers of influence, which makes is also a bit tricky. And this, combined with the competitive approach to international relations, have brought a new degree of difficulty to arms control. And I think that is something that needs a lot of work. So all these new, also your initiative and the work we try to do for disarmament are very much something that we have to keep on running very diligently. It's of course, for Finland, it's clear that the NPT forms the legal basis for non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament at the moment, and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons contributes to the security of Finland and all countries. It's a clear framework for us. And of course, the NPT is the treaty in which recognized nuclear powers are legally committed to nuclear disarmament. And the primary responsibility for nuclear disarmament lies with the countries possessing those weapons, and it is important that they all participate in it. At the same time, we emphasize the particular responsibility of Russia and the United States as the largest nuclear powers by far. And in our view, there's an urgent need to include non-strategic nuclear weapons into arms control. Before we reach a nuclear-free world, it is important to reduce the risks associated with nuclear weapons and to ensure that nuclear weapons are never used as a weapon of war again. As we know, there would be no winners in that kind of a war. So, for this context, I think we are really discussing a very topical issue. As Jussi mentioned at the beginning, I have my background in civil society organizations in Finland. I have worked in, I used to work in Committee of 100 of Finland, which is an online peace organization. And it actually has a great history of being one of those organizations, along many other Finnish peace organizations, which lobbied the Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty, which later came to be a Nobel Peace Prize worth initiative. And it was great to see how my colleagues worked really hard on that. And it was also a gradual process where we had to, in civil society, at that time when I was in civil society, I was activist there, we have to convince our own government first, and then, and that then to build up to kind of keeping up this pressure in nuclear, on nuclear disarmament on international field. So I think all these kind of initiatives and new initiatives for new treaties, they have the kind of path, and civil society has a great role in those initiatives, and of course that's why I also want to thank also the civil society of Finland being very active in TPNW treaty and keeping this kind of topic in discussions, and they also, I have to say, they're constantly taking contact to the cabinets of the foreign minister as well. Especially my office, because I'm responsible for liaisoning with the civil society organizations for the minister. And I can tell you that we have been very actively following now the this process as well, TPNW, and also, of course, we are looking forward if the UN will send us the kind of observatory invitation to the next year's conference. And when it comes, we will have our procedures to look at it. My personal view is that, of course, that's something that we should really look into. And by these words, I'll be very interested to hear your views. Also, Tarja Krumpel's views, who has also a great profile in both Finnish politics and civil society organizations and scientific circles as well. So with these words, I'd like to thank you again for inviting me here, and congratulations to Ambassador for this great achievement.
Thank you so much, State Secretary Sumuvuori. Knowing now that you might have to leave early, I would actually propose a small change to the agenda. There is one question in the chat, which I think people can see, but I could read it. But then I would also maybe please do still have questions coming if they go to the State Secretary, and we would only after that take then Ms. Dr. Tarja Krumpel's address. So the question to Ms. Sumuvuori would be that could you outline Finland's objections to the TPNW? If Finland is in favor of prohibiting weapons of mass destruction, why has it not supported this treaty that prohibits the worst weapons ever created? What is needed for this support? Please.
So can I address this directly?
Yes. Please.
Okay. Yes, certainly. Well, as I said, I'm relying on this government program, of course, because that was negotiated before the government started. We have 5 parties in the government coalition, and I think the most important line there is, as I said at the beginning, that we will continue to analyze it, and that's something that I take care personally. That's something that we will very much look at how it will kind of evolve now when it's accomplished, and also we will also kind of assess its kind of implications to other treaties. So that's something that we'll look at. Maybe I could also say that we have a long-standing policy of participating in agreements and treaties that effectively advance disarmament. So it's also that's the reason why we also always look at very carefully the kind of structures of the treaty. And at the moment, it's clear that no nuclear possessor is yet joining the TPNW. So it's very important to look at that as well, that the kind of nuclear possessors are really joining the treaty. And I don't know, there might be some uncertainties still to some stipulation of the treaty, and that's...
I think we just lost the connection, at least for a while. You're back.
I'm back. Oh yeah, it kind of finished my official connection, but it transferred to the home office network. So yeah, my question would have been about concerning military cooperation with nuclear weapon possessors and business transactions with companies originating from these countries. So if you have any kind of views on that, how they are kind of looked at in the treaty. But yeah, as I said, we will continue to follow closely how it develops, and we will also look at the international debate concerning the TPNW, and then we will decide at an appropriate time about our possible participation as an observer to the meetings and conferences of the TPNW.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. There is another question on the chat, but that's very similar to the one that is already answered. So I wonder, do you want to comment still on this, or was your good answer enough? You can see from...
I don't actually see another question. I see the question by Elli Kytömäki and comment by Carlos Umana, but I don't see any other questions there.
Okay, sorry. It's this that mostly to Johanna Sumuvuori. Good presentation with excellent points on Finnish commitment to nuclear disarmament. Given this...
that's the one I answered.
Sorry, because then there was this one from Carlos Umana, and this I think you couldn't see, but it's very related.
Okay.
Outline Finland's objections to the TPNW is if Finland is in favor of prohibiting weapons and so on. I think you covered this rather well. And I also want to say from my part that thank you very much for the presentation, which was very, very useful from the perspective of the Finnish government, and also the line there that Finland is assessing if Finland would be joining also the treaty, if I understood correctly, and also analyzing, comparing different processes. So these are very welcome steps. Thank you so much. I now would welcome Dr. Tarja Kronberg to take the floor, please. And the State Secretary, if you need to leave, we thank you at this stage, and then you have to go. But it's been a privilege to have you with us. But please do stay if you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I want to first of all congratulate Elayne Whyte Gómez for this prize. I think the management of the meetings in New York in 2017, I was present there. I think it was fantastic in the way that you could get the TPNW to be accepted in spite of all kinds of turmoils in the audience. So congratulations, and I'm very proud that the Finnish Association has selected you. I will talk about something else, but I just want to say that the Finnish Peace Union is working actively to get Finland to sign the TPNW. And unfortunately, I think the cause is the same as all the Scandinavian countries. None of the Scandinavian countries have so far signed the TPNW. And the question is about relations to the US. So unfortunately, but let's hope that we can make a breakthrough at some point in time. I would like to talk about nuclear weapon-free world, and I have just written a book on renegotiation of the nuclear order, which just came last week from Routledge, and it looks at not only on the NPT and the TPNW, but looks at sort of where could the potential change for a nuclear weapon-free world emerge from? I mean, and the approach is sociology of technology, which looks at different social groups and how they attached meaning to technology, and in this case, nuclear technology. So they are, just to look at this table, there are 3 groups in the deterrence group, the P5, the outside 4, and then the umbrella states. They are all dependent on deterrence. They are not the countries that would, or the groups that would sort of promote a nuclear weapon-free world. Then on the abstinence side, there's the threshold states, which are sort of on the threshold. They just have not decided to step over. Brazil is an example in Latin America. Iran is another one. They are the exit states that have had nuclear weapons but don't have them anymore, and are today, they are not very many, but they are very active in promoting the nuclear weapon-free world. And then the states in the nuclear weapon-free zones. And I would like to talk a little bit more about this, because I think this is the group of states that potentially could change the world. And then we have the TPNW states, and then we'll, with interest, follow your meeting in January to see what happens. But I would actually like to see and indicate how the nuclear weapon-free zones could actually change the nuclear order. And first of all, they are many. There are 115 states. They are the majority of the states. And secondly, they have a very good example from the NPT negotiations. It's very little known, but there were Mexican amendments that actually got the Article 6 into the NPT, but also the Latin American states were already at the time organized, and they could pressure the US to give unconditional security assurances to the Latin American nuclear weapon-free zone. This is unique, and I think Dean Rusk at the time, who was the Secretary of State in the US, he said, this is the first time ever that the US actually reduces the potential nuclear weapons clearly, unambiguously gives a guarantee to the Latin American states. And so far, it's the only case. It is really the only case. So the Latin American nuclear weapon-free states could actually affect change, and they could get this guarantee. But also, it was because the Americans were afraid that the Latin American states would not vote for the NPT in the UN. So this is the precedence, and I think the nuclear weapon-free states, 115 of them with this background, could actually pose the question to the NPT and to the General Assembly that unconditional security guarantees must be given to all nuclear weapon-free zones and all nuclear weapon-free countries, which means that the more of these unconditional guarantees are given, the less states can be attacked by nuclear weapons. I mean, if there are more and more states which are in nuclear weapon-free zones and there are unconditional guarantees, then who should the nuclear weapon states actually attack? And as this group becomes more and smaller, they may in the end only be able to attack each other. And so this is the question, and the question is then how could this be done? And the NPT cannot be changed without the P5. They have, all P5 have a veto right, so they can veto any changes to the NPT. Also, we can say that in the review conferences, nuclear weapon-free zone is world is talked about, but nothing happens. And I think among researchers, there's now a feeling that the way that the NPT can be changed, or the nuclear weapon, the nuclear order can be changed, is by a walkout. If the nuclear weapon-free states would work out of the NPT review conference and say that we need these unconditional guarantees that you don't attack us with nuclear weapons, then I think the nuclear weapon states would do something. So this is actually the mechanism or the process. Now, what would be needed for this to take place? I think this is, of course, always the question. And I think one of the things which I have talked to many of the nuclear weapon-free zones is that they need a global organization. They have very good regional organizations, and very strong ones, especially in Latin America, but also they need a global organization. So a global organization with 115, I think maybe soon 120 nuclear weapon-free states would be a very powerful factor in the NPT review conference. They could walk out, they could threaten to walk out, and by doing so, they could change the situation. And the first phase would be the unconditional security guarantees. And then, of course, the question is, how can you increase so that most of the world would be covered by nuclear weapon-free zones? And there are some indications. For example, in Europe, we are talking about we have France, Britain is now out, but we have France. And so the question is, how could we go around France? How could we establish nuclear weapon-free zone in Europe without France? And so the idea is to have sort of sub-regional. For example, a Finnish president, Urho Kekkonen, made a proposal of nuclear weapon-free Scandinavia. And that was sort of seen in the context of the Cold War, so it never won any stronger support. But I think there are mechanisms. So I think my proposal to you, Elayne, would be that when you're in the TPNW start talking about, you should look at your members who are in these zones and promote a global organization with them. And usually if there's a walkout, if a country leaves the NPT, for example, then there's a lot of bad talk, and it is said that, well, these countries are looking for nuclear weapons and they are the paria, like North Korea is the only country that has left the NPT. So, but the nuclear weapon-free states would not meet this criticism because they have a double commitment to nuclear weapon-free status. They are members of the NPT, but they also have these regional treaties. So none of the countries would be able to say that, well, they are maybe seeking for nuclear weapons, everybody is clear that this is not the case. So I do think that, I hope that when you start organizing in the TPNW, that the nuclear weapon-free states come out in a powerful position and actually can do, the process can be well defined, and the end state is the nuclear weapon-free world. And I would just like to end at this optimistic note, instead of, everybody says that, well, nuclear weapon-free is not in my lifetime. I think we have to say that it must be in our lifetime, or at least in our children's lifetime. So my hope would be the nuclear weapon-free states who are members of the zones. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kronberg, for your presentation and views, and optimism also, and deep knowledge that you have. We now learned through the chat that State Secretary Sumuri had to leave, and we knew this, so thank you for being still with us, and we continue still for a few minutes with Ambassador Whyte and Dr. Tarja Kronberg. It's a bit confusing to me, this chat, and how you are able to then direct questions to the panel, or so I can see there is some chat and maybe some personal questions that you have received already. So please feel free to address those questions if you have any, or then also react to the presentations by others. So I would like to give the floor back to Ambassador Whyte, please.
Thank you, Jussi. Although the State Secretary has left, I already answered her some of the questions, but I would like to share what I said, because I did not know I was answering only to her. But overall, I very much welcome this exchange with Finland, and to understand the vision towards the TPNW. I see several points of convergence with the concerns and the visions of Finland. For instance, the concern about seeing more and better political will on the part of the nuclear weapon states to engage in dialogue and arms control agreements. I think we need a political vision together with a new vision, because the most important problem that we are seeing is that we are, as I mentioned, in light of great power competition, the first answer or the first reaction is military buildup. And we think that we need more diverse policy options than just military buildup. So in that sense, I think we coincide with the concerns and vision of Finland in this regard. We are also concerned with promoting the strengthening of compliance of international agreements, promoting also an inclusion of non-strategic nuclear weapons in arms control and restraint processes as well. Overall, that is in terms of some specific aspects that she mentioned, but there is a question on how we see the implementation process of the TPNW vis-a-vis the rest of the architecture. And what I can tell you is that from the point of view of Costa Rica, and this is one of the reasons why we were interested in helping to facilitate these processes, because of who we are as a nation, completely reliant on international law and all the international peaceful mechanisms for global governance. We have an interest in seeing the architecture being strengthened, not to deconstruct whatever we have been building in the last 75 years, but quite to the contrary, to see how we improve and strengthen what we have. And one way in which we strongly believe that we need to strengthen the architecture that has been built is by establishing and analyzing and identifying what sorts of interfaces and mutually reinforcing mechanisms we can use when we are implementing the different treaties. As some scholars have already started to mention, that a dialogue of the presidencies of the current regimes, the NPT, the TPNW, and also the CTBT, would be very important to be able to identify in very concrete manner how we can further as I said, the compliance mechanisms, the coordination of the compliance mechanisms, and the dialogue. I am going to cite an example. Most nuclear weapon-free zone treaties already established the obligation to submit reports, either to the International Atomic Energy Agency or other sort of reports that need to be reporting obligations that need to be met vis-a-vis different treaties. So there might be an opportunity that some national reports help in reinforcing the compliance, implementation, follow-up of other regimes. And this will be very important, especially, and I will be referring to Tarha, what she was mentioning about the role of the nuclear weapon-free zone treaties. I think we have come to a point in the international community in which we have learned that the most important value added that we can have at this moment is to build systemic approaches in every single field, because we need to stop the silo approach, not only between among regimes of one topic, but also among different regimes, cross-cutting issues or cross-cutting issues, nuclear, climate change, SDGs, everything is interconnected, and we need to find ways in which we can start building those interfaces. In the case of the nuclear architecture, we have a very special and strong need for coordination among the existing regimes. Now, in terms of the role of the nuclear weapon-free zone treaties, and I think I very much agree with this vision that those regimes can actually help to somewhat start to change the nuclear order, and having the countries that are state parties to these treaties, regional treaties, request, demand nuclear security assurances, negative security assurances from the side of the nuclear weapon states is a fundamental path. There is no reason why we should not get them, especially if we have come together. Many countries have already come together to join the global prohibition treaty, and already have reinforced the commitments of non-proliferation, prohibition, and renunciation of nuclear weapons. So there is no reason for those countries not to receive negative security assurances on the part of nuclear weapon states. And that call that we used to have I think it's more pertinent than ever that we should have some sort of a universal negative security assurance on the part of the nuclear weapon states to all the treaties that belong to nuclear weapon free zone treaties. And if we put we add to that the fact that many countries have already ratified the TPNW, the cause is strengthened. So I very much agree that this is a line that we should explore. I am not sure if I understand the dialogue that they have had in the meetings of the nuclear weapon free zones have not always been maybe as productive in terms of agreements. I do not know what the potential is for creating an organization, but also we can think that we can promote dialogue among all of those within the framework of the meeting of state parties of the TPNW as well. So there are many ways in which we can bring the state parties of the nuclear weapon free zone treaties together, and I think they are not mutually exclusive. I think the more the better, and if we have an international organization that brings them together, that's perfect. If we do not have that, and they only have negotiations or talks within the framework of the TPNW, that is good. But if we can have the two fora to complement each other, would be the best response or solution for that. So I would like to end there and just remain attentive to any other comment or question that you might have.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for these views and wisdom, I would call it. I have to apologize from you all now that your moderator has not been quite succeeding in keeping this in 1 hour. And I know I can read your mind, Dr. Kronberg, that you would have much to comment and go deeper. And but luckily, I know that you will. You and others, you will have the dialogue continuing after this. But I would still welcome, perhaps, Dr. Kronberg, if you could see the question by Elli Kytömäki in the chat, a short answer, if you can, please. Thank you.
Yes, I think I follow the Middle East zone, nuclear weapon-free zone, very closely and participate in the meetings. And I think one of the things, if you look at where are the hindrances for nuclear weapon-free zones covering the whole world, there are two hindrances. One is the regions where there is one or several nuclear weapon-free countries. It's very difficult. Israel is the case in the Middle East. And secondly, it's the superpowers that they want to keep this ambiguity about when they would attack with nuclear weapons, because in the start, the security assurances were that if they are attacked by nuclear weapons, then they will not attack with, then they will only attack with nuclear weapons. Now this has emerged as to also biological weapons and chemical weapons. The last US security policy also said that infrastructure, critical infrastructure could be a case where they would attack with nuclear weapons. So actually we see the nuclear weapons use, at least in theory, expanding. So these two things have to be taken care of. And I think the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone is a good example because everybody knows that it is necessary. And I'm hoping that maybe now the Abraham Accords that are taking place, Israel working together with some of the Arab countries, that the Arab countries would take this seriously and now have a dialogue with Israel about the nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kronberg. And I think we have come to the close of this this panel discussion and also of this event. And I have enjoyed it very much. I think I'm, if possible, even more convinced that the Peace Prize went to the right direction. So congratulations, Ambassador, one more time. But also the richness of the discussion, I think it was very useful, and I'm quite happy that this has been recorded also, so that the audience can be then much wider. And really, it's ongoing process. As we learned, there is much hope to build on the treaty, for example, in our journey towards the world without nuclear weapons. So I thank you all very much, all the panelists, and especially now Ambassador Whyte. Congratulations one more time. Have a good day and good evening to wherever you are. Thank you very much.